Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe, where today we're going to be taking a look at the latest addition to the secondary weapon category, the Gauntlet-based Staticor. Now the Staticor might be the first in its class for a Gauntlet type weapon, but it very closely resembles the way throwing knives work, with a left click throwing a single energy ball dealing 80 pure radiation damage. And that actually puts it at the top of the thrown weapons category, deals a full 25 more raw damage than the very hard hitting Spearer. Now the supporting stats of the Staticor are pretty decent as well. 10% crit chance, which isn't really quite enough to do a crit build, 200% crit damage multiplier, decent magazine size of 45, especially with a just 1.5 second reload time, and probably a stronger stat, which is a status chance of a very beefy 25%. Now when you combine that with the fact that the Staticor is a pure elemental weapon, it means you can really pick and choose what procs you want to be using. You don't have to worry about your impact, puncture and slash getting in the way. The range on it is actually also pretty decent as well, with what appears to be just over about 50 meters range, but the charge attack does seem to be a fair amount shorter than that. Now talking about the charge attack, I don't have any concrete numbers on how much the damage is on it yet, but it does seem to be roughly double the damage of the single shots, maybe even slightly more than that. It doesn't also seem to be anything more than just additional damage, however, although it will drain ammo depending on how long you hold that charge for, about 1 ammo per second that you hold the charge, so that is something to pay attention to. Now there does seem to be another feature to the Staticor, which is that if you make contact with an enemy while either firing or charging the weapon, it will cause a guaranteed knockdown to that unit, which can be some very good close range crowd control, but the one thing to remember is that it will interrupt your charge and will release the damage from whatever point the charge got to. But it's not all great things with the Staticor. Firstly, the charge attack projectile was quite possibly the slowest thing known to man. While undetected as Loki, I was levelling this, Corpus enemies were just able to walk away from the projectile before it even impacted, resulting in quite a large number of shots being missed altogether. Now there are a couple of things that can be done to combat this. Never fire the charge attack directly at a unit, but at the floor near them, and hope that they don't really move very much. Or combine it with the flight speed mod terminal velocity, which does help out slightly. Now in addition to that, radiation damage is very weak against the infested, so damage won't be, well, the damage will be a lot less against the infested than it will be against other factions, although the radiation proc never stops being useful. So while the damage won't be great, that utility will still be there. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod the Staticor. Now it comes with the dash polarity as standard, however we're going to add 3 former, which is going to be 3 Vs. Now this is how I personally found best to mod the Staticor. I've seen a whole number of different builds for the Staticor in terms of the way it's built. I've seen Magnum Force, I've seen all 90% elementals, people talking about how going with just the 90% elementals and relying on like a 50% status is the way to go with this thing. Personally, I felt boosting the status chance, not really relying on RNG to do your work for you, was the best way for me to go, especially with a weapon that is so focused on status. It's all personal preference, but this is how I felt it was best. Now in terms of modding, we're going to go with Hornet Strike, Barrel Diffusion, Lethal Torrent. We've got Lethal Momentum on there, which is going to try and help some of the flight speed of that the charge projectile, since it is ridiculously slow. And we've got Gunslinger on here as well for the extra fire rate. Now, I've got one build here, and Config A, which is going to be basically my Grineer, my Corpus, and my Corrosive Projection Void build, which is basically viral, radiation, and heat. Now, I don't go with with magnetic and toxin against the Corpus, because I just don't feel that the damage is there. In fact, when you're proccing viral, when you're doing radiation, you've got the heat damage, you actually do more damage with the radiation viral build than you do with the magnetic and toxin one, just because of the way the procs work. So this is the way I would go against the Corpus as well, and obviously Corrosive Projection Void is much like the Grineer. However, for just normal Void, non-corrosive projection, then we'll go with Pistol Pestilence and Jolt for corrosive. and then we've got primed heated charge in there as well for the extra heat damage. As I say, this is how personally I felt it best. Play around with the build a little bit. If you feel that 50% element status is enough for you, personally I didn't. I found it too hit or miss. It was one of those things that basically you were relying on the RNG far too much to actually really be effective. Even if you do the charge attack and you hit multiple enemies at once, it's better to be proccing radiation or viral on the whole group rather than just 1 or 2 out of 4. So this is personally how I felt it best. Like I say, there are different other ways of doing it. So do I think the Staticor is worth the time and effort invested into maxing it? And honestly, yeah, I do think it is worth it. The damage isn't bad at all, and the utility it brings is pretty decent, especially with the ability to really focus down the status procs that you want to do. I know a lot of people were excited for the charge mechanic of this weapon. Personally, I was, until I got my hands on that ridiculously slow projectile time. It's so slow, I doubt I'm ever going to use it. Even with terminal velocity, half the time the enemies just walk or run away before it even gets close. I like the idea of knocking down enemies with the charge attack as well, but realistically, the only guys you're going to want to do that to are the heavy units, stuff like the bombards, the heavy gunners and the like, which means that even though you knock them down, a lot of the time because of the way as long as they start their animation, their knockdown is still going to go off, and it kind of just defeats the object of that feature because you're just going to get knocked down as well. Now, I know this sounds like I dislike the weapon, but that's just not true. As a status weapon, it's fantastic. It looks pretty cool. The charge and the reload animations are fantastic. Even if the throwing animation, it looks very out of place and kind of awkward. It doesn't really fit the weapon at all. But this is another one of those weapons that has late game potential as a status spreader. For a status weapon, radiation is probably the best damage you can have, since it's useful against any and all factuals from level 1 to level 3000, but then combining that with corrosive for non-corrosive projection void, or viral for just about everything, this is an extremely effective weapon to have as a support weapon, even if it's not there specifically for damage. So the Staticor, a great weapon, decent damage, great status, but not without its flaws. You will be able to tell immediately whether you're going to like it or not. Personally, despite its flaws, I find it to be a really fun weapon to mess around with, and will probably be my sidearm for any endurance runs in the future. So just a quick little update from me. So you've seen a couple of new series appear on my channel this last week, Armour 3 and a return to Armoured Warfare. Now this is a step for me to try and diversify my content a bit, as well as keeping myself sane. Now I know the majority of you here are for Warframe, and I know in terms of my channel, sticking to Warframe only videos would get me the most views, but the thing is, we all need time to unwind. Focusing 100% on a single game is the quickest way to burn out. But this does not mean that there will be less Warframe content on my channel. The advantage with something like Rainbow Six Siege and with Armoured Warfare is that I can have a single recording session and record enough for a couple of videos, a couple of weeks worth of videos. So you guys get more content to enjoy, and it doesn't really take away a huge amount of time from the content that I focus and will remain to focus on, which is Warframe. So Armour 3, Armoured Warfare and Rainbow Six Siege are here to stay. There might be, 1 or 2 videos a week. And Warframe will return to a more regular schedule now as well. I've been struggling with recording issues as you've seen in the last couple of videos. So I've been really trying to focus on making sure my content is up to the quality that you guys deserve. Rather than just putting out videos with, out of sync audio and stuff like that. But I urge you, try out some of the other content. Rainbow Six and Armour will be playing with friends, which I hope will be pretty entertaining. And Armoured Warfare is going to evolve into more of a tank review kind of series for the game. And also some strategies to actually playing with those specific tanks. And let's be honest, who doesn't like tanks? Now, all the recording stuff is sorted, so I should be able to make videos more effectively and with better quality. So some very requested series will return in the near future, as well as these 3 new series. So it's going to be a busy time, and you guys will have more content to choose from than ever. So as always guys, many thanks for watching, and I shall see you in the next video.